So firstly, there are many stages where I think I would disagree. I think the first one is that. Fundamentally, a lot of the time we look at the universe and we look at ways in which things interact, and we extrapolate and we go, the universe must interact this way. So we look at cause and effect and we go, everything here, every effect has a cause. And we assume that means that the entire entity, the entire universe must therefore.
So this is called the fallacy of composition.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm not even using that, because what we're saying is, you're saying just because a wall is made out of small bricks doesn't mean the wall itself is small.
Yeah.
But if the bricks are red, the wall is also red.
Yeah.
So we're at a standoff.
Yeah.
But I'm using the argument from contingency. So what I'm saying is that we cannot have an infinite regress of dependent things. So what that means is that something that is dependent is myself, the universe, the galaxies. So that is dependent. Yeah. Now, dependent is something that requires something else for its own existence.
I know.
It's composed of pieces, and it can be any other way.
Yeah.
So now we know it's Medal of Honor. They give me all of this. It gets heavy. But so the thing is here that the universe can be any other way, and it's composed of pieces. So it's not independent or necessary. So what we say is, if it is dependent, would you say the universe is dependent or independent?
I would say it's. I'm a determinist. So
How determinist?
I wouldn't say that everything being determined and everything being a necessary way.
So it requires a determiner.
No.
Why? Because
so the idea of infinite regress seems paradoxical, and I understand it seems counterintuitive.
Yes.
But the thing is, we're using our intuition, which is limited not only to within our universe, but within our planet, really, our intuition and our daily lives.
Yes.
And it may be the case that our intuition plays with the laws of the universe. It may not be the case. But ultimately, when I have these discussions, the burden of proof isn't on me. Because again, I'm not saying a God doesn't exist. I'm not making a claim.
Yeah, you're saying I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm trying to make a claim that it does. So that's why. Do you say the universe is dependent or independent?
I'd say independent.
Okay, so now what you've done is then you've accepted that we require something independent, but you've ascribed it to the universe. So now what I want to do is then show proof to you why the universe is not independent, and if it is not independent, then it requires something independent, because you've accepted that it's independent. You've ascribed it to the universe.
Yeah.
Now what did we say? The universe, if it's composed of pieces, if it can be any other way, then it is dependent.
Yeah, but I don't think it can be any other way, right?
Okay. But what I'm saying is this, that it can, for example, if we had 5 billion extra less galaxies, is that the same universe?
No.
Okay, so it can be any other way.
No, because I don't think that could be the case.
What do you mean by that?
So I'm saying we can create hypotheticals and like, if the universe had, this, for example, this specific Quran wasn't here, or that camera wasn't here, then the universe would be different. Can that be the case? It plays within our intuition that, it may be the case, right? It may be the case that camera could be here. We could see with the universe, but I don't think that could be the case. You know
okay, no problem.
Everything's
but even if we go for determinism, that the fact that it is composed of pieces shows that it is dependent. Because the fact that it is made out of pieces, yes?
No, I don't think so.
Why not? But that's my definition. My definition of something that is dependent is it can be any other way, but you said, okay, you believe it's not, it could be one way, and that is composed of pieces, energy.
Yeah, but it has to meet both of those things. So if it doesn't meet one of them, which it doesn't for me as well.
Yes, that's fine. But also it should not be the other one. Do you accept that it is composed of energy, for example? The second law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created or destroyed, So, does energy have a will?
No.
Does it have consciousness?
No.
Okay, then how does it give rise to beings like us? So, for example, therefore what we say is that it is dependent because, number one, even if we don't say it could be any other way and we go with what you're saying, it's like that, the fact that it's composed of pieces shows that it is dependent. Now, if it is dependent, what does it depend on?
Well, I still don't agree that it is dependent. But we could even.
Do you accept that it's composed by pieces?
But I don't think that makes something dependent.
But how not?
Well, because you said that dependency it's made of pieces, and those pieces can have the potential to be
like energy. Like, for example, energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it is independent. It means we say it is infinitely dependent on the independent being. So just because, you get what I'm trying to say? Just because energy cannot be created or destroyed, it doesn't make it infinite. All it means is it's post-eternal, but it's post-eternally relying on the independent being.
But that begs the question, doesn't it? Really? So you're saying that this is what we say energy is, and what it depends on.
Yes.
Energy depends on an independent being. Therefore, energy is dependent.
Yes.
Therefore, it needs a depender. Like it begs the question.
No, but it has to, because energy. There's a set amount of energy within our universe.
Yeah.
The question is, if there is a set amount of energy within our universe, who has limited it to that amount?
Yeah.
And if it is limited that amount, it shows that it's dependent. And if it is dependent, it requires something that's independent.
Well, I don't think it would, because I think
Why not?
If the universe could exist forever, I don't.
No. But forever. Okay.
Yeah.
I can say to you, I accept it. Universe exists post-eternally, forever.
Yeah.
That's fine. But the point is this: the fact that it has a set amount of energy within itself that cannot be created or destroyed, no problem. It is still dependent. Why? Because why is there a set amount? Who set that amount? Why not one more or one less?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, good.
But I'm not to answer that question, right?
No, but it shows its dependency.
I don't think it does, because if there were a specific amount forever, theoretically,
Yes.
if the universe did exist forever, and there was a specific amount that couldn't create,
Which there is.
yeah, then that would still that wouldn't necessitate a necessary being.
It does. I've got my good friend here who's saying, I don't know if you've seen him as well.
Yeah.
So maybe you can add on to this. I think it'll be interesting. Just to add on. So basically, the argument that I was saying is that even though we have, for example, we discussed this energy cannot be created or destroyed. But the point I'm saying is the fact that it's limited to a number, it's still, even if we agree that it's eternal. Yeah, just basically contingency argument. But he's a hard determinist, so he believes the universe cannot be any other way. But I still said that the fact that there's energy within our universe and there is a set amount, even if it's eternal, it post-eternally relies on the independent being. Right? So correct me if I'm making any mistakes here. So what I was saying is, because energy cannot be created or destroyed because of second law of thermodynamics, but the fact that there is a set amount shows its limitation, and if it's limited, it's independent. Dependent. If it's dependent, it requires an independent being to make sense.
Yeah.
The way I would put it is as follows: is that if we're saying that the universe is determined, and everything within it is,
I think you'll do a better job.
No, because there's an uninterrupted causal chain of antecedent events.
Let me stand in the middle so the mic picks you guys up. You can stand there.
Because this is the determinist argument, you can tell me if there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, that's generally.
So there's an uninterrupted causal chain of antecedent events, which means that the universe and everything within it is determined. Okay, and so therefore notions of free will within the universe is absurd or wrong or whatever. So okay, fine. So what I would say to that is as follows: is that we agree that the universe is determined.
Yeah.
From one perspective.
Yeah, but we disagree on like how, right?
Yeah. So what I would say is that we believe in the difference between, say, me and you, okay, or let's say an atheist or agnostic. I don't know what your position is, but
Agnostic,
and say, for example, someone who believes in necessary existence, is that wherein we believe, for example, a necessary existence, which eliminates all notions of an infinite regress of causes. Yeah. Therein you will believe something like the antecedent causal chain of uninterrupted events, which are it's infinite regress of some sort. Okay? So that's the major difference. We believe in infinite regress. We believe in one independent thing which is not regressive. Yep. But then the question is this: is that okay? The universe, is it contingent or is it necessary? Our answer is as follows. Yeah. The universe is contingent in abstraction. So in relation to itself, it's contingent. Yeah. But in relation to whether you believe in an uninterrupted causal chain of causal events, which we would say is absurd, or a necessary entity, then it becomes necessary only because of another. So in other words, the universe is necessary not due to itself, but it's necessary as a result of its connection with the necessary existence. Yeah. But in abstraction, it's contingent.
Okay. So I would ask, so why can the universe not exist reliant on itself, but like a God can? You know?
Okay.
Yeah. So because God is immaterial.
So why is the universe independent, but God is not?
Well, yeah. So like if the idea that. So presumably, if you agree in an instigator of all change, like a necessary being, then that being must be like eternal, like it's outside of time, must be going back forever, or not going back forever, but like
always be
everywhere, there. Right, all at once.
Not okay.
So like outside of time.
Okay.
But why can I also don't believe time is real. We're not going to get into that metaphysical discussion. So why can something like a God exist forever and rely on itself, but a universe can't?
Well, the thing is about the universe is that you can conceive of it in two different ways. Either you can think of it as like a multiverse And let's exhaust the options. You can have a multiverse which is limited. You can have a multiverse which is unlimited.
Yeah.
So an infinite multiverse. Or you can have a universe which is not unlimited, okay, but which once again you can claim is a necessary being in and of itself. We would say the question is, if you believe the universe exists, is it dependent or is the universe dependent or independent?
He said independent. He said independent.
Okay, if you say it's independent, so the first thing I'll bring to your attention is that you believe in the existence of an independent thing. So this is actually, I would say, a movement away from atheism completely.
Yeah, but I'm not an atheist. So.
No, I understand. So I'm just outlining that point.
Yeah.
Because at what point do we say that atheism is eliminated?
Yeah.
We say, okay, well, now if you believe in the existence of an independent entity, and this is self-sufficient, it doesn't require anything outside of itself to subsist, then in this case, now you've moved away to, you're moving towards either deism or classical theism.
Yeah. So okay. the way I describe it, just briefly, is that I kind of give, same thing with my approach to conspiracy theories. Like, even if conspiracies make sense, if there is, and I'm not saying religious, but like,
you better not, otherwise there'll be trouble.
If there were another possible explanation, I would suspend belief. So I think it'd be like idiotic to say that God doesn't exist because I don't know the whole universe, right? And I think it may make sense within its own sphere and logic that if you went with a necessary being, like all these things would like add up, right? And so that is one possible explanation. But equally, to me, there's another possible explanation that the universe. I mean, there are a few, but like so like the universe could have gone back forever and infinite regress or rely on itself. So because I think these are two, at the very least two, maybe more possible explanations, it's up to like it's the burden proof is on other people to like.
Okay, so now I'll make the argument, right? I'll start by saying that the first principle that I think ought to be considered is that something bereft of a quality, for the most part. I'll give you there are exceptions to this rule, like any rule, but something bereft of a quality cannot produce it. So I'm accepting that there are instances where that's not the case. Something bereft of a quality cannot produce it. Okay, so nothingness cannot produce something. Because nothingness is defined as the absence of something.
No, I agree with that.
So for the most part, so in that case we'll say, look, if that's the case, that something which is bereft of a quality cannot produce it, for the most part, and that's the general principle, then we will say, look at the universe itself. Or let's look at a potential multiverse, whether it's limited or unlimited. If we look at all three of those things, either a universe or an unlimited universe or a limited universe, you'll find that in all three cases, that it's composed of things which are contingent. There's no doubt about that.
This is where we disagreed, because if I'm a determinist, I don't think that things are contingent.
No, in abstraction, because there's no way to disagree with this in abstraction. In other words, I'm saying that the only reason as a determinist which you would say that these things are necessary is in relation to the uninterrupted causal chain. I'm saying fine, have that belief, that's not a problem. I'm saying in abstraction, this bottle is contingent.
I like
the only reason why you can say as a determinist that this bottle is necessary is in connection with the uninterrupted causal chain. I'm saying that we're not considering that connection at the moment, and we're saying everything within the universe in abstraction cannot be claimed to be, because then the burden of proof will be on you to prove how this bottle, which had an inception, is made up of limited variables, is in some way necessary and self-subsistent, which we can, I mean, anything that is susceptible to destructibility or generatability is in essence contingent. And if I can destroy this, or if there was a time in which this doesn't exist, then that kind of breaks that idea. So in abstraction, the things in the universe don't actually exist, are contingent, basically.
Okay.
So if we agree on that, so we're saying that the principle at play is that, and there are exceptions to the principle, I know the exceptions, where compositional fallacy will happen.
We spoke about that.
But the general principle is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it. So if we have a universe that is composed of things which are contingent, in much the same way as that if you add nothingness to nothingness, you will not get something from it. If you add contingency to contingency, you cannot get necessity, because something bereft of a quality cannot produce it. So no matter how much you bring contingent things with contingent things, you cannot, at some point, critical mass, have a necessary thing. To put this in analogous format, I'll say this. This is a phone. As you know, this is a big case, as you can see.
Yeah.
Now, actually, you might ask the question, why does this man have a case like this? Today, my phone fell from a high distance, and nothing happened to it.
Did you throw it or did it fall?
No, it fell.
Okay.
I looked down, nothing happened. But despite this fact, it's contingent, I can assure you.
Yes.
Now, this phone, which is contingent, let's use the analogy of a charge. It's right now, I don't know, 50% charge.
That's not bad.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Usually it's
Because I
5.
put, the charge before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's problems happening.
Yeah.
All right, so this phone is dependent on charge in order to operate.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. If I have 2 phones, they will depend on more charge.
Yeah.
If I have 3 phones, they will depend on even more charge. If I have 4 phones, they'll depend on it. I'm saying there is no point at which, or there is no evidence that there is any point which I'll bring X amount of phones and that it will not be dependent on charge in order to operate.
Yeah.
And if there was such a thing, the power companies would be having a field day.
Yeah.
You know, the EDF Energy and British Gas or whatever. They'll say, you know what, just keep putting things out, and maybe at one point we don't even need to source the material.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that when you put dependent things with dependent things together, there is no evidence to suggest that at one point it becomes necessary. And if there is evidence, I would like to see it.
Yeah, but I still don't agree with the idea that these things are dependent, obviously, and that's where. Yes,
No, what I'm saying, you did agree that it's contingent and abstraction.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm entirely. What do you mean by contingent in abstraction?
Meaning without reference to the uninterrupted causal chain.
Yeah, but like if you're looking at contingency and necessity, you have to reference what came before it.
No, I understand, but then you'll be falling into a circular argument. In order for us to start from the beginning and avoid the circularity, we must argue from bottom up. We're saying that the constituent parts of this universe that we can examine empirically and put under a microscope and deal with, those parts, there is no evidence that there is any quality of necessity exists within them in such a way that would make them self-sufficient or self-subsist within themselves.
Yeah, but they can't subsist within themselves, but they can subsist on the previous thing. And that is a
but you can't go infinite regress then of dependent things, which we're saying.
But this is the thing that, like, I'm not necessarily arguing for, but I'm saying because I'm almost equally convinced by this idea that infinite regress could exist. I mean, the idea that
an infinite regress of dependent things?
I think is
no, but the issue is if we say that when we talk about an infinite regress of anything, we have to fill in the blanks here. An infinite regress of what? If you say infinity can exist in the real world, that's one postulation. If you say that an infinite regress of causes can exist, that's another postulation. If we say an infinite regress of dependent things can exist, that's a third postulation, and they're not all the same.
No,
So what I'm saying is, if the claim is, what is the claim? Is the claim that there can be an infinite regress of dependent things or causes or?
So an infinite regress of cause and effect chains, and then because they go back infinitely, there is no first one necessarily, but it makes sense that if all of the things are set out in the same way and they will all produce the same thing, they are necessitating everything else.
And do these things have the quality of dependence as well?
No.
So for example, we said that this abstraction is dependent, it's contingent. So you're saying that, okay, someone caused this, so it has both the quality of dependence and cause. It's been preponderated, so it has, a cause is in the dictionary something which brings rise to phenomena, right?
Yeah.
All right, so this has been brought rise to, so it's been caused from that angle, right?
Yeah.
But also a dependent thing in the dictionary is something which relies on something else.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, is your claim that this is both has the quality of dependence and cause, and that there can be an infinite regress of either or one of them?
So it's dependent on the previous action, the previous
right,
cause,
okay.
right? Let's say that the bottle machine.
Yeah.
It's dependent on that thing and it working. And I think that thing's existence, again, the bottle machine, was caused by someone who wanted to make a bottle machine, and then it goes back, right? So
eternally.
Yeah. So these things are cause and effect, and that is dependent on the previous thing.
Okay, good.
But like. As Alex O'Connor, as I'm sure you know, said about the P implies Q.
Who's Alex O'Connor?
If P is necessary,
Cosmic.
Oh, the boy. Okay.
The boy. Yeah, P implies Q, and P is necessary. Q is necessary.
Okay.
Right. So in which case, if I'm saying that all the causes before this thing that is in effect and has been caused and is dependent on these causes, as long as those things that it's dependent on are necessary, which I think the entire chain is.
And if that's, look, if it depends on what we're saying, why P entails Q, and P is necessary, therefore Q is necessary.
Yeah.
It's just like 101 of propositional logic, modus ponens. But what I'm saying is that if we've already conceded to the fact, if you're saying that God is necessary, therefore what comes from God is also necessary.
Yeah.
We accept that as the case from one perspective. What I was objecting to, by the way, in that thing, was that I was saying that if you're saying P entails Q and Q is a necessary existence, because P is a necessary existence, there's a problem here. This was where we were talking cross purposes. But going back to the point, now if you say this has both the quality of causation and dependency, then you can have an infinite. Leave it. It's fine. Yeah, and so it can have the quality of dependency.
Yeah.
What we're saying is, my argument in counter to you will be that to argue ad absurdum, okay? I would say if you have an infinite regress of dependent things, then you would have to concede that infinite regress of dependent things is independent. So the set of all dependent things is dependent, whether it's infinite or finite.
Wait, dependent or independent? So the infinite regress.
So the infinite regress that you're speaking about, fine, no problem. Let's accept that it can happen.
Okay.
So we're saying let's accept that there can be an infinite set or a set of dependent things.
Yeah.
Accept it, no problem. Yeah. Like this one, that one, me, you, we're all dependent. No problem. So we have a set now which is infinite independent things.
Mm-hmm.
But that set, according to you, would then have to be independent, therefore.
No. Oh yeah, independent. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the set itself has taken the form of an independent set.
Yeah.
So in other words, now the set has become necessary from contingent.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay. Now what I would say to you in response is that anything that is made up of component parts is contingent.
Yeah, that's what we spoke about.
Well,
The reason why we're saying that is, as we've explained before, if something is susceptible, anything susceptible to addition or subtraction is limited.
Yes.
But I don't think it is. So like,
How?
in theory, we could conceive of that camera stand being there, or this person like this. We can conceive of that, but that doesn't mean that it could actually be the case, you know?
Well,
I'm not convinced, because in some ways it's impossible to prove that this world...
It's composed of pieces.
That this world
It's composed of
existed in the same way.
But it's composed of pieces.
No, but I'm saying is, even if it's composed of pieces, doesn't mean to say that it could exist differently. So if that camera stand wasn't there, we can conceive that the world would generally be the same, but it is logically impossible to prove that we could have experienced the same thing, because we're experiencing the world where this camera stand is there. So because it has been.
I'm not sure if I'm speaking correctly, but are you talking about the definition of necessity, which talks about everything being one way, not the other way?
Yeah. So because it has parts, it's contingent, and I'm not agreeing with that.
Okay, so what I'm saying to you is that we have to now explain why I said that, right? Yeah. In the beginning of this conversation, I said something bereft of a quality, for the most part, which you agreed with, cannot produce it. Mm-hmm. Okay, now, what I mean by something bereft of a quality cannot produce it is like nothingness is bereft of somethingness. Yeah. Therefore, if you add nothingness to nothingness, you just have more nothingness.
Yeah.
I'm saying that there is no critical mass point at which you add nothingness to such an extent that somehow you get something. Would you agree?
Yeah.
You keep adding zeros to zero, you have zero.
With nothingness, yeah.
No, but that's what you're doing, he's saying.
No, what I'm saying is that contingency works in the same way as nothingness.
Exactly.
So, because the principle at play is the same. The principle is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it, with a few exceptions, and that's where the fallacy of composition comes.
Yeah, but so I think because there are exceptions, I think this.
Okay, well, no, I'll tell you. So the exceptions are this. And this might sound a bit complicated, but I will just lay it out for you, right? The exception are, if the adding of something to something else increases the whole in either size, intensity, or protraction, then the whole is differentiated from the part.
Yeah.
So for example, if I say this day is long, it doesn't mean just because the day is long, that every single part of the day is long. If I say that the elephant is big, it doesn't mean because the elephant is big, every single atom of the elephant is big, because it can be made of small parts. What I'm saying to you is that the exception to the rule, which is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it, is in cases which, if the part is added to another part, the whole is increased in any way. If a part is added to another part, the whole is increased. What I'm saying is that there is no evidence, no empirical or any other kind of evidence, Just like there's no evidence that when you add nothing to nothing, you have something.
Yeah.
There is no evidence, and the burden of proof is upon the one that's making the claim. So if I'm saying that there is no evidence, and when you add contingency or dependency to dependency, that you have independence / necessity, then you would have to demonstrate to me how adding contingency to contingency at any point can bring about necessity.
Yeah. So I mean, it's really tricky to talk about infinity, right? As I'm sure we understand, it's not like a thing that we can really conceive of. And same thing with infinite regress. But we would assume an infinite regress wouldn't be like an entity. It wouldn't possess an infinite amount of real things. Almost. It seems like perplexing to think about it. But I would say, even though adding infinity. So infinity add 1 is infinity, but it's also like a different type of infinity. In the same way as there are different types of infinities in scales, right? So there's an infinite amount of numbers between 0 and 1, an infinite amount of numbers between 0 and 0.1. They're just different scales of infinity.
So like Zeno's paradox.
Similar. So in the same way as we could have an infinite regress, and like I still think their constituent parts are different to the whole. They're treated differently.
Yeah, but by the way, what I'm saying does not negate the fact that you can have an infinite regress of things.
Yeah, but that won't make it independent.
I just want to delineate what I'm saying with what you're saying. You're saying that you're making the argument, which is a fine argument, you can make it, which is again, for example, David Hilbert, whatever, his hotel example, that if you had a hotel with an infinite amount of people and you have another person come in, then is there another person that comes in or not? So you're making an argument for the possibility of an infinite amount of things in the world. I'm saying, notwithstanding that argument or whether or not that argument is true, what I'm saying is opposite, is irrelevant to that.
Well, no, I don't think it is. So just briefly to interject, is that you're saying that it only matters if adding something changes its size, and I think adding one line of cause and effect does change its size. Because even though adding one...
No. I said size, intensity, or protraction.
But it's like, so if something adds...
And.
Yeah, so like, in the same way as one H2O molecule doesn't constitute wetness or a tide, but if you add loads of them and adding to the size, you have an emergent property, so it's different, right? And this is, I think, one of those examples.
Say that again, sorry. Say that.
So like, if you have one water molecule, it's not wet, and it's not like, you don't have a tide. If you have loads of them, it is, because as you said...
No, but it's innate, but it's innately that molecule is wet. When you add it together, it makes a bigger...
No.
Yeah, but like the property emerges, right? When you add to it. In the same way as you said, the atoms of the elephant and stuff like that, and the day. And they all apply. But I think this is one of those examples. Because yes, you are adding 1 to infinity, which seems like it's staying the same size because it's infinite. It's a different scale of infinity.
No, but I'm not negating the fact that you can have an infinity in the real world.
No, but I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that point. What I'm saying is that when you say that there are exceptions to the rule, when you're talking about like you can't keep adding nothing and nothing.
Sorry, so I think we're talking cross purposes. So let me just. I'm not making an argument for an impossibility of an infinity.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, okay. So I'm saying that even if you believe in infinity, what I said was that it depends on an infinite amount of what.
Yes.
So if you have non-entities and you add non-entities. To non-entities, add infinitum, yes, you'll still have non-entities. If you add 0 to 0, add infinitum. What I'm saying is that the principle at play is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it. And I've given you the exception to that rule, which is that unless by adding a part to the whole, it increases its basically size, its intensity, or its protraction. It's extension basically. Now, I accept that you can put emergent properties together and it can bring something new, something emergent.
And I think this regress applies to that rule.
No, but what I'm saying here is there is no evidence that when you add contingent things to contingent things, there's any critical mass point where it actually turns into necessity. So in order for you to say that there is evidence of that, you have to show us physical evidence, empirical evidence, or
Can I just quickly summarize what you're saying? Very simply. If I had 1 billion nothings, would I ever get something? Okay. How is it that you're saying if we have infinite contingent things, we will get something that is necessary?
Because I don't think.
Because you said no to one, but you're saying yes to the same thing, which is the same example.
Because I think in the same way as you said that the exceptions to this rule of adding something and getting something else, the difference is with like nothing and something is that by definition nothing is the absence of something, right? I don't think by definition like necessity and contingency are the exact opposite, and I don't think the existence of one would negate.
No, they're not the exact opposite. The opposite of necessity would be impossibility. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so in fact, impossibility is a kind of necessity because like a square circle necessarily does not exist, right? So contingency lies in the middle between the two categories.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying here is that there has to be evidence.
Yeah.
Like because it seems to me like, with all due respect, you both seem to be very polite. What I'm saying is that you're skeptical.
Yeah.
You're very skeptical when it comes to evidence of the truth of God, but you're open to something which you're unable to provide any evidence
Yeah.
for.
So the reason I justify it is that I'm not like the way I've described it as if I do believe it. But my argument is that this could be the case.
Yeah, but you have to show how.
So this is the difference. I don't, right?
But you're an extreme
Because
skeptic.
I've got, if I have two possible things that could be true, if one of them is not disproven, I don't have.
So let me tell you. Okay, I accept. So now let's shift the. Sorry, this keeps coming back to me. Let's shift the burden of proof back on me.
Yeah.
These are my claims. So in order to negate or to affirm your position of a possibility of adding contingent things to contingent things ad infinitum or even on a limited level, and somehow there's a critical mass point at which it becomes necessary, the following must be disproven.
But I'm not looking to prove it.
No, I'm saying the following. What I'm saying is must be disproven. So I'm saying is that the general principle at play is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it, and that the only exceptions to this quality is that if you add part to whole in the mereological way, that somehow the set is changed or it becomes bigger and somehow or more. There's some intensity difference or some. So unless you have that, then there will be it will be commensurate. The part and whole, there will be a commensurate relationship between part and whole. It will not be differentiated mereologically. So what I'm saying at this point is, if this is my claim, and I'm saying that anything you bring into on an empirical level, as an investigation to this claim, anything you bring will affirm this point. Any example, any analogy, any inductive point, it will affirm this point. So in other words, if you put things together scientifically under a microscope, what I'm saying will still remain integrous. So at which point now you have to say, actually, give me a counter example of a situation in which you can add part to whole, and the whole will be different if the part whole relationship is not differentiated in the ways that you have to give a counter example of that.
Yeah, so the idea that if you keep adding something, so like if your friend used like add nothing and nothing to nothing and you won't get something. I think it's slightly different. I think we both slightly agree that the instances of necessity and contingency.
No, I'm saying it's the same. I'm saying contingency and nothingness work in the same way.
Oh, okay. So, but either way, the idea is that I understand the argument that if you say that a group of dependent things creates an independent thing, a necessary chain, which is I also believe. What is almost the number? Like if three dependent things on a necessary chain, and what's the number? But the difference is when we look at like adding one, what's the critical mass point? We can't understand the critical mass point because infinity isn't just a really, really big number. It's a complete concept. So it's not that I've got 100 links. I add one. Well, that doesn't make an independent chain. I add another one. It's not. You're not looking at a case of adding really because it is an infinite. It's not a number.
Okay, so I'll say no problem, but you have to concede 2 points here. You have to take two very clear, logical leaps of faith. You have to believe infinity could exist. Not only that, but there's some way in which if you add dependent things together,
I'm going to go into it.
That it somehow becomes necessary, despite the fact that we know that the principle at play is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it, except with the exceptions I've given. So you kind of had to endure the contradiction of, okay, I'm living a life, I know that there's no way of me proving that this is a possibility even. I'm not telling you to prove that this is the case. I'm just asking you to show me how this could be the case.
Well, the reason it could be the case, so the idea is that the reason it could be the case is the probability isn't zero. The only way the probability could be zero of that thing existing or being possible is if we disprove it completely. And I don't think so. It's not because I'm not really making a positive claim. The burden of proof isn't on me.
I'm making a positive claim.
But what I'm saying is, so my belief system is that if this claim hasn't been disproven, the idea of infinite regress, and I don't think it has sufficient.
No, infinite regress we don't have a problem with.
I know. But I'm saying because this whole idea could exist, I don't have to prove it. I'm saying it could exist, and another one about a God, a necessary being, could also exist. I don't need to choose between the two. As long as these two things could be the case, I can be agnostic, right? So I don't need to prove, okay.
No, but in order for you to live put this in psychological terms.
Yeah.
In order for you to live, put an atheist, Richard Dawkins' words, yeah, for you to be an intellectually fulfilled agnostic or whatever, yeah, or he said Charles Darwin made him an intellectually fulfilled atheist.
Yeah.
All right, I'm saying for if I were you and I want to live as an intellectually fulfilled atheist or an agnostic, I have to be able to not show the existence, not of infinite regress, of a possibility of an infinite amount of contingent things coming together and producing necessity. I'm not saying to do it on an empirical level, at least on a conceptual level. And what you have not been able to do is this. So you have not been able to show how it's conceptually possible, considering the general principles at play that we accept for the everyday life and in logic in general. You have not been able to show conceptually how, despite the fact that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it, except in certain meteorological circumstances, that you want to make an exception for this rule when it comes to contingency, and you haven't shown conceptually how that exception can be made. So now you have to live with that, endure that basically contradiction, if you like, or that difficulty.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily contradiction, because like I've said before, I'm not making an active claim about anything. So I'm saying that if I am, people ask me like why go. It's very easy to have this discussion with an atheist, someone that believes that there is no God, because they would have a burden of proof. But I don't, because I'm not making an active claim. So all I'm saying is that unless all these other options are disproven, I have no logical reason to believe in one over another, right? So this idea, it sounds absurd, of infinite regress and whatnot, I have to prove that it exists, or...
Once again, infinite regress I don't have an issue with right now.
No.
My issue is...
all these other things,
Yeah.
even if I haven't been able to prove them, it doesn't matter, because if you don't disprove them, there's still a possibility. And if there's still a possibility, like, if you're
if it's a given that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it, and it's also a given that the exception to that is that when you add part to whole, that there's some increase.
Which I think...
So if you add these two things, if these two things are givens, that A, something bereft of a quality cannot produce it, and B, that and B, which is except that if you add part to whole, that there's an increase in part in whole. Sorry, if you take those two things as a given, which is that there's no attempt to disprove these 2 points, then it follows that there cannot be a limited or an infinite amount of contingent things that at any point will produce a necessary thing, which means that it also follows that there's a necessary existence. If that follows, if there's a necessary existence, then everything depends upon that, and nothing depends upon, and it depends upon nothing. This is our conception of God.
No,
Anyways, thank you very much.
Thank
you very much, brother. Take care. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Where shall I put these?